Today is August 3, and I have a loose plan today. I'd like to talk about the Haizhen Transformation and what I'm about to offer, which is a focus session to facilitate the Haizhen Transformation. So, what does this all mean? I've been talking about this program that I'm putting together, and really it's my way of conceptualizing what those little step by step pieces are to move from the place where you are now to the place where you want to be. This is the way that I notice things happen in my life, and through conversations with other people, I believe that it works exactly the same way. What happens though is sometimes we don't notice the steps that take us from one place to another place. So by coming down to like those steps, distilling it down into a process where you can repeatedly apply the same steps and continue to get new results is something that's really interesting for me. A couple of things that help this all come together is um, all of the things that I've learned before, but really coming down to the idea that there is a pattern for change. Through John Overdurf and Melissa Tiers, they talk about it as um, the meta pattern. I learned it through Mike and Chris at the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy as activate, dissociate, associate, collapse, ADAC. And having those two different ways of describing the same pattern basically talks about how you're living in a state, a problem, something that you don't like. That's current. So your current state is where you want to activate into. You want to change something, you want to feel into it. Then you need to remove yourself from that state, dissociate, and so that you can feel something different. When you're out of that state, you will then associate into a state that you prefer, and then you collapse that back onto your initial state, kind of like back to where you are presently, and that completes the transformation. That's how everything happens. That's how everything changes, just in different, um, time scales, I suppose. So the usual, like if you're not familiar with how your unconscious mind works, how hypnosis works, and then how like the whole like accept become aware of something, accept it, and then let it go. Like if you're stuck in the beginning where you're just constantly activating into the problem state, you're just like, I have this problem, this is my problem, this is where I live. I'm going to try and get through it by doing all these little things, but then it's like just really hard to change. It's because that way of approaching, kind of the common sense way that change happens, is basically that same process, just stretched out over time. So what does that mean? So first, if you're activating into a problem state, you're just feeling the problem all the time. You might be complaining, you might be debriefing to people, you might be sitting there and just ruminating over it, like, why is this thing happening to me? And why am I still X, Y, or Z? What happens is over time, you're going to dissociate from the state that you're feeling right now. So there's two things that could happen. One, you may find that time passes, you forget, and then eventually you move out of that state. So let's say, what's a good example? Let's say feeling into a job, right? You're starting a new job. And when you start the job, you might feel like insecure. You might feel incompetent. Like, I don't know what's going on. It's my first day here, and there's so many new things. There's so many new things that I have to learn. And you could feel like you're no good at it. What happens is you continue to show up at that job day after day after day. And slowly you learn little bit by little bit. And every day you know a little bit more. That's just what's going to happen if you choose that, right? The other option is you could lock into the state and just always feel like you're not able to do something. So for example, like learning new technology. When computers first came out, not everybody was familiar with computers. Actually, when computers came out, most people had never heard of computers, like all the way back, right? And as this is coming out, you'll have a number of different responses. So sometimes people who have been around for longer will look at something new and say, like, this is so far out of my wheelhouse. And conceptually, it makes sense. Like if you go from a place without computers and without a digital world, And then suddenly you have to conceptualize like, okay, there's a desktop and things are happening on a screen that I'm interacting with a physical mouse, but then it's moving this digital thing. Like how do those two worlds relate? Like I don't have that interface. Um, so then you could be stuck in that state of like, oh, this is something all different. And because oftentimes the pattern that I notice is people end up getting stuck more when you're more comfortable and familiar with who you think you are. So the longer that you've worked in an industry, in a job, in a profession, the harder it is for you to change because you will have achieved some type of competency in that profession. So when you're feeling like you're confident and you know what you're doing, suddenly being given something new, you're put into this place of like, I'm no longer good enough. And that's not what it means. It just means you're learning something new. However, it's easy just to mistake those things. So you're locked into a state where you're like, I'm feeling completely confident and competent at what I'm doing until this new thing comes up. Now, when you have a problem, it's kind of the reverse. The problem is always there at some point, and your reactions to it is in some way protective. It helps you preserve that idea of you, that initial kind of, we'll call it a problem state or starting place. And when you're in that place, it feels more comfortable not to change. So to say, like, I can't do that new thing, and that's why it's okay for me to stay exactly as I am. It feels a little bit more comfortable because you have that safety of things that you know. But it also means that you're not growing, you're not changing, and you're not learning anything new. And because time passes and the environment changes, your context changes, eventually you may end up just finding yourself so far away from where everybody else is that you're feeling like you're having to play catch up. And that is in some way a dissociation, right? Like a dissociation over time is just basically having the state that you're in compared at a later time uh, back to that initial place. So let's say like a year passes, and if I'm saying I'm in the exact same place I was 1 year ago, that's absolutely not true. Like I've had new experiences, I've learned new things. And with that space, it's a dissociation. It's like, oh, like maybe things are different. Maybe with a computer, I've been sitting in front of it, I've seen it every day for 365 days, and finally I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to go and do something different just because I've spent that amount of time. Uh, I've just spent that amount of time. So then when you have that dissociation, then it gives you a space of maybe something can change because I'm not actually locked into this thing that I think that I am. I can move past it and I can move away from it. So then when you're in that kind of liminal space of like, maybe this isn't the way that I have to be, then I can choose to be a different way. I might learn something, I might try something new, I'll get new information. And then when that happens and I have that new information, maybe I start like playing around on the computer, I start making some mistakes, I start learning, I learn the rules of this new thing that I'm learning. Then I can look back at that original state and say like, oh, well, now I feel differently. So that old one, I don't need it. I can accept that it was there. It was something that happened. And I can now be this new thing, this new place. So that can happen over time. And that does happen over time. When you think of different books that talk about like setting in habits, you're just going about and making yourself feel differently through doing something new. And the more that you do that new thing, the easier that it gets. So then you have dissociation from your current state just by the fact that you're doing these little habits every single day. And when you're doing that, it's starting from the place of action. I'm going to start doing something until I feel differently. So you're doing things that will make you feel differently rather than changing your mindset per se. If in your mind, you're thinking like, I'm going to do this thing, and then you're continuing to lock in that old state. I'm going to use this computer, but I still believe that I suck at computers and that I can't learn anything new, and this thing is all scary. Then even the more that you use it, your progress will be less and less, like will be more slow, because you haven't given yourself the permission. You haven't accepted the fact that you can learn something new. It's like you may miss the subtle changes unless you really pay attention to them. So you could then almost do this on different scales, right? Like, for example, some people have life-changing experiences when they go and travel. If you've never traveled before and you've only lived where you've lived, you've only had the experiences in your kind of local surroundings. When you go to a completely new place, you'll see people do things differently, speak differently, they'll have different customs, they'll eat different foods, um, do different activities. And when you see that, that could be this dissociation of like, oh, wow, like life can be different. There's so much variation and everybody's doing things a little bit differently. When you see that, then you come back into your current place and things change. You'll see things differently. You have new perspective. You have a wider awareness. And it's easy to accept that these things are different because like you go somewhere different and this is just how everybody else is acting. To them, that is the normal. That is the way that things are. So then you see that and you can come back into a different spot, like back into your same spot and say like, okay, now I have a new perspective. I'm going to look at things differently. And these are all like really physical ways and external ways of getting to that change and making those significant shifts. You can also do the same thing from the other side of changing your mindset. And that sometimes is the part that's difficult because if I tell you that you have a current state that you're in, whether it's a current state or a problem state, if you're stuck in a limiting pattern, when you're stuck in that pattern, it's easy to say, this is all that I see. This is all that I see. When your awareness begins to expand, that's when you can introduce almost those seeds of doubt that this is not the way that I need to see the world. Something can be different. And sometimes those things start subtly. Sometimes those things are like little realizations or finally accepting the things that you've been telling yourself all of this time. That like, I am good enough. I can do this thing. I can show up in the way that I need to. And that's where the Haizhen transformation comes in. What I've learned over all of my studies is that the actual change is not difficult. Doing something new is not a difficult thing. If you want to start a habit like I'm going to work out every single day, doing that is not actually difficult. What's difficult is your mindset when you're approaching that. Because you might think like, oh, it's such a pain. Like I'll talk about myself. Like, okay, I'm going to work out every day. But what are the things that are stopping me? Like one of the silliest things is like the clothes that I'll wear. Because I'm like, oh, if I sweat and then this, if I sweat into this, then I'll have to wash it. Or like I don't have like my favorite pair of shorts. I don't have like the shirt that I want. I don't want to sweat all over the floor. And like these things are not actually about doing the thing. They're just excuses not to do the thing. So sometimes in those cases, getting understanding and acknowledging those pieces of like, oh, hey, like this is this narrative that I'm running that I don't actually need. And it doesn't actually help me get to my goal. And even if I give space to those barriers, it doesn't actually change anything because ultimately it's like two things that are kind of like counter to each other. If I want to exercise, I'm going to have to sweat. If I don't want to sweat, then I'm not going to exercise. So then which one is it going to be? One of them has to give. One of them has to give. And that's a mindset shift, you know, to be okay. To think of like, how do you want to be? And I want to be like sweaty and gross. And I want to be like lying down, like with just like exhausted from the work that I put in. And if that's what I want, then I can go ahead and do that, right? That's where the exercise and the working out will happen. So then getting past those mindset barriers is often the challenge because they're very nefarious. They just appear. We have thoughts, we have these ways of thinking and approaching the world that if you don't question them, they just seem like normal to you. But really, you can see the way that you see them, and I can see things the way that I see them. And that's often where talking to another person is really helpful, because they will give you an outside perspective that you hadn't seen before. So with the Haizhen transformation, it's a couple things. One is creating a space to hold that new part of you, and to hold a space to look at those things safely, those patterns safely that are holding you in place. How do we look at this? We then look through the lens of hypnosis to understand that your actions are driven by unconscious drivers, things that you don't necessarily consciously interact with. The things that are easy to you are automatic, and that's unconscious because you're not thinking of them. Think about walking, breathing, beating your heart. You don't think about any of these things, and yet you do them just the same. So when you create that unconscious pattern of actually going about and doing the things that you want, then that becomes much easier. And finally, the piece that really caps all of this, to lock it all in and to make it kind of logically make sense, is the piece of human design. Number one, it gives you a blueprint to understand the frame that you're working within, because you as an individual are completely unique. You have your own experience, you have your own specific reason for being here in this human experience. And sometimes when you see that, it begins to clarify, and it helps you build a new narrative around who you are meant to be in this world. It's not like an identity crisis, because what I've found is most people find that the information there resonates so deeply. It resonates with that low-level hum, that feeling that underlies your whole experience, where you're like, I'm meant for something different. I'm meant to be doing something different, but I don't feel like it's the right place. I'm just going to keep kind of like moving through and trying to find the piece that actually, the piece, the place, the job, the roles that actually align with me. And we all feel that hum. We all feel that vibration inside us. And we don't always acknowledge it. So human design, number one, puts that in front of you. And number two, it gives you a way of testing that. It defines, based on your energetic type, what your ideal experience is. And not in a way of like, okay, you're going to like uh, get a job and have a degree and then you'll get promotions. It's not that. It's more along the lines of, when you are aligned, this is what you'll feel. And that's called your signature theme. So whether it's satisfaction, whether it's peace, whether it's success or surprise, depending on your energetic type, when you're in the moment of like, yes, this is what I feel like when I'm at my best, you begin to identify that band. And when you move out of that, when you move into not self territory, which means you're operating in ways that are not ideal for you, then you can begin to notice and pause and say like, oh, I'm feeling this thing that I don't usually feel, or that I'm feeling this thing that indicates I'm not at my not self. What happened? And that's where you can have the pause to go look back and consider the choices that you've made and how you'll make choices into the future. So that is more of that is an awareness tool to identify where you may have conditioning or limiting patterns that you're holding on to that are affecting your current experience. And in the Haizhen transformation, the theory is you have layers and layers and layers and layers of this. So basically, starting from the one that's presenting now, that thing that is always on your mind that's just bothering you and keeping you up at night, that's the top layer. Once you move that layer and begin to find that comfort, then you can move down to the next layer, and you can continue to go deeper and deeper into your experience so that you can truly feel like yourself at every single level. So while in the Haizhen transformation, the whole program talks about my theory of moving from shore of, I don't know where I'm at, I'm lost, I'm confused about who I'm meant to be, to the core, where you are living in your core essence, just confidently, firmly, always you in every space. In a Haizhen transformation focus session, in a focus session, that's where we work one-on-one to talk about or to focus in on one of those limiting patterns and to examine it, replace it with an empowering state. So this is moving you from a problem state to a target state where this is the next step for you. And oftentimes having that pattern repeated, basically I have a limiting pattern, I'm going to look at it, I'm going to replace it with an empowering state. And doing this over and over and over again is something that will just keep leveling you up, continue to move you to the next level. So when you basically, I love the idea of fractals. Fractals in the sense that you're repeating one thing over and over again, and it continues to build. And I believe this is how our world works. When we have difficulty, we're often running the wrong fractal. We're running like a pattern that's no longer good for us. And if you think about you from the very moment of your existence in terms of the physical world and how you have come to this point, it's probably the same pattern, just repeating over and over again, right? Like a cell replicates, like a sperm and an egg come together, it creates a cell, and then it begins to replicate, and then it replicates and it replicates. And it continues to replicate. And just based on those rules that it's tested, you begin to differentiate, you begin to get into like quote unquote complex organisms, and then you become this human thing that comes out and sits in front of a camera to make videos and talks to other people. Or you might be on the other side of it, sitting in front of a television or a device, watching someone else talk about something. But all of it is just patterns that we run over and over again. So what patterns exist in your life that are no longer serving you? And how would you be more empowered right now? Think about that. I mean, like, it's not homework. Do whatever you want. I'm gonna be sitting over here chilling, putting together this focus session. I'm really excited about building this out because this feels like the right next step. Eventually, I will come back to selling this Haizhen Transformation as a program because really it is self-serve. It's like you could do all of this by yourself when you know what it is that you're doing. So as I build this out together, as I build this out in real time, first, my next immediate step is to begin to utilize this framework of a focus session and continue to develop this Haizhen transformation. So my name is John. I'm a Haizhen transformation facilitator, and I'd love it if you continue to follow along with me. So like and follow for more, and leave a comment asking a question. If you're interested in this, look for the link below to get started. And peace out.